Hi, I'm Lindsey, and I'm talking with medtech industry leaders on how they change lives for a better world.
The inventions and technologies are fascinating, and so are the people who work with them.
There was a period of time where I realized fundamentally my job was to go hang out with really smart people that are saving lives and then do work that would help them save more lives.
I got into the business to save lives, and it is incredibly motivating to work with people who are in that same business, saving or improving lives.
What better industry than where I get to wake up every day and just save people's lives?
These are extraordinary people doing extraordinary work, and this is The Leading Difference. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Leading Difference podcast. I'm your host, Lindsey, and today I'm delighted to welcome as my guest, Dave Rosa. Dave is an entrepreneur with 3 decades of experience in the medical device industry, spanning a variety of technologies and products. In addition to CEO roles with early-stage medical device companies, Mr. Rosa's background also includes senior roles with C.R. Bard Inc., Boston Scientific Inc., and St. Jude Medical, where his responsibilities included marketing, product development, and business development. He's been named as an inventor on multiple medical device patents, serves on 7 corporate boards, and has raised $200 million in the capital markets. Well, Dave, thank you so much for being here today. I am absolutely delighted to have you on the show.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. I would love if you wouldn't mind by starting out and just telling us a little bit about yourself, your background, and what led you to MedTech.
Yeah, so born and raised in a small town called Bridgeport, Pennsylvania, outside of Philadelphia, and really was in love with the medtech industry from the time I was much younger. So I have been in medtech now. It's going on 32 years, and that's everything from large medical device companies to startup companies. I've been in so many different areas of medtech. I've been in orthopedics, cardiovascular, and I mean everything involving the heart. I've been in it in some way, shape, or form, as well as neuro, which is what I'm in now. And I think, why did I get into medtech? I think this all goes back when I was a little kid. I was the little kid that was walking street people to my house and bringing them into my home for my mom to make a meal. I don't know that she always appreciated that, doing that, but there were more than enough times where she sat me down and I was maybe only 4 or 5 years old. And she's like, honey, I know you want to help people, but you can't bring everyone home. And I was like, okay, mom, of course, until the next time.
Right.
But, I think it started at an early age and really has carried through, the rest of my career.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So you've always been interested in helping people and you've had a really nice variety of experiences within MedTech. But tell us about your path from that early just interest and care in people and their well-being to perhaps your educational journey and maybe like the first little bit of your career that led you to where you are now.
Yeah. So in high school, I was involved in sports and even prior to high school. And I had so many physical issues. I had initially a shoulder problem that was, I'll say, pretty complicated, at least back in those times. And what I found is by the time I got to college, and, I'm still trying to figure out what I want to do with my life and what career I want to take. I was actually in chemical engineering, but came to the conclusion that I hated chemistry, which didn't help things out. And I really knew, my passion was on the medical side. And a lot of it, was driven because of my own issues, my own shoulder issues, because it really put a damper on, any potential I had at especially playing baseball. So in college, I went to Drexel University. There really wasn't a course for undergraduate biomedical engineering. That was like a graduate program. And, I decided that I would take courses in electrical engineering and a program called commerce and engineering, which kind of merges both the business and engineering side of the equation. So I actually started out not in medical. I was in electrical engineering And I was probably one of the worst electrical engineers working at Westinghouse at the time. And I remember one of the managers saying to me, he's like, all the other engineers and marketing people really like working with you. Why is that? And I said, I really don't know, other than, I've always been a passionate person about whatever I'm doing. So at that point, I started thinking that engineering was not the path for me, that I was really much more passionate about medical because it was impacting my life with my shoulder. And then by that time, my knees and everything else started to go as well. But I graduated with a degree in commerce and engineering. And then after working a few years in electrical engineering for Westinghouse Electric, I just started knocking on doors because my passion was, helping others. And I wanted to be involved in an area that might help me, being orthopedics. So that's kind of how I got my first job, knocking on doors, and Stryker Instruments decided they would take a chance on me. And that was kind of the beginning.
Very nice. And so when you found medical device, was it this really exciting moment of realizing that it could marry your interests in engineering and your desire to help people? Was that like just this cool moment of going, oh, wow, like I can do both?
Yeah, I remember actually praying about this, like, what am I supposed to do? Like, and how do I go about this? And I don't know, it brought back some memories, of when my father was at the end of his life, and he was this stern Italian man, there was no discussion about feelings or anything like that. It was like, you do what I tell you to do. You talk when I tell you to talk. Otherwise, you say nothing. So my dad's literally on his deathbed, and he says to me, I really want to thank you, son, for taking care of your mother and I all these years with, medical decisions. And he said, you always were helping people from the time you were a little boy. And it actually stunned me that my dad, who never appeared to be paying attention to anything regarding me, was like, hey, you really cared about helping people, not just us, but, this goes back to the beginning for you. So it was also more of a reinforcement of like, yeah, I've really got to be in med tech, and I'm going to start with, how I can help my own issues or, families members' issues that they may have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I think sometimes we don't realize the impact that we're making at the time, and being able to just do what we feel is right and what we know helps others can actually make an impact. And then hopefully we get those opportunities like you got with your father to realize eventually, oh, okay, yeah, I am on the right path doing the right things at this time. So yeah, it's great to have those moments of reinforcement. But
And if you fast forward, to something, again, just more reinforcement, although it's much later in my career, and I've had other moments like this, but this was just last month. I was at a memorial service for one of the physicians that used our product to treat a young lady. She was 17 years old at the time for epilepsy. And so the doctor that performed a procedure on her had a tragic accident, passed away. And we were all at this memorial service for him. And the father, along with the mother and this young lady who's now in college, they came up to me. We were, just chatting about how unfortunate the situation is. And when I got ready to, go back to the service, he said to me, sir, I just want to thank you for giving my baby girl her life back. And I mean, those kinds of things, when people say those things to you, like I said, it's happened more than once.
yeah.
And it's because of something, that you've, committed the company to accomplishing. And then you see results like this. There's nothing more rewarding than that.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. So, all right. So in fast forwarding a little bit, you started in medtech with Stryker. And then what gave you, and there's probably maybe some things in between, but what gave you the idea for what you're doing now? And can you just take us along that journey from starting out in medical device to where you are now, including that just pathway to even higher roles in leadership and that learning curve as well?
Yeah, that's a long story when you've been in it for 30 some years. I started out in marketing. I always liked the interaction between customers, meaning, physicians, patients, when, we had the opportunity to speak to the patient. And then, I would like to think that maybe some of my decision making and some of my ideas, led to success in some of these companies. And I think upper management, was able to identify that I might have some of the qualities that they were looking for really in the next generation of leaders. And this goes back to, my first job in the cardiovascular industry. Gosh, this was in 1995. So about 30 years ago with Boston Scientific. And I was able to go from a product manager to a director of marketing. And I was there for a total of about 4 years. And I really enjoyed the strategic part of the job. And I wanted to be more involved in that. And I got an opportunity to go to a startup to run sales and marketing, also in the cardiovascular space. And that was a great experience because, in smaller companies, and this, by the way, was my first opportunity in a smaller company, you have to wear a lot of hats. And I always liked to be more hands-on and still am, to be honest. And, this gave me an opportunity to really, get involved in more than just what the job detail or the job description called for. And, these things all sometimes, require some luck, but definitely, the right timing. And an opportunity in the startup company that I left Boston Scientific for became available at the CEO level. And the investors, the company was funded by venture capitalists, met with me and said, we think you can take the company to the next level. And I think that was back in 2003, and pretty much been a CEO ever since then. But, I think a lot of the success comes from and confidence from, the hiring companies. I think what people notice about me is my passion, my commitment, and probably the fact that, I think one of the things I'm strong with is developing a vision. I mean, that's something that I think is really critical with leaders, is that you've got to develop a vision for the company, a strategy for the company, so that others can understand what the goals are. So that's kind of my path. It's, I would say every 4 to 5 years, I've had an opportunity to either start a company or run a company. And in NeuroOne, which is, my current company, I was actually retired when I was approached by a few individuals who had this idea. And what started out as me just, helping them turned into, gosh, we would love you to run the company. And I really thought there was an opportunity there, to help people who suffered from these neurological disorders, primarily brain related disorders. But, that vision is kind of expanded beyond just the brain into other areas of the body.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I appreciate you sharing more about your journey. I love the fact that you're both an engineer and you have this creative side with marketing and you're able to marry all that together. That's really cool and gives you such a unique perspective on, I would say product development and then commercialization. But okay, so let's talk about your company now and what are you excited about? What are some of the innovations coming out of it? You mentioned that it started in one place and one focus, and now we get to see it expanding. And so I'd just love to hear all about your company as well.
Sure. So we started out with the intention to develop this electrode technology. And initially, it was primarily to be used for brain related procedures for patients, initially at least, that were suffering with epilepsy. And this technology, the idea was, let's combine functions with this in that it would have the ability to perform a diagnostic function. And for these patients, the diagnostic function was finding the area in the brain that was triggering these issues. And then once you were able to accomplish that, then using the same device, destroy that brain tissue that was causing the problem in an effort to eliminate the seizures that patients were having. So that's kind of where we started. We are selling that technology. We have a distribution partner, Zimmer Biomet,
Mhm.
that is our exclusive distributor for that technology. And we've had great success in treating patients. So, the story that I told about the father, who thanked me for getting his daughter's life back, that's what that technology is used for.
Mm.
And really what patients had to face before this technology was available is they would have to have a very invasive surgery just for the diagnostic part of the procedure. So the part where you're just trying to identify the problem area, that was one surgery. And we're talking about, drills that are drilling holes, through the skull with these devices being placed in the brain. And then once that part was done, the patients would go home and they would be scheduled for a follow-up procedure where they would have to come back again, have an invasive procedure into the brain. And then that second procedure would be the one where they would eliminate or destroy the problematic brain tissue. So if you're a patient, 2 invasive surgeries, 2 hospitalizations, 2 separate devices, and we said, why can't you do it with one?
Hmm.
And that's where we are. We then more or less leveraged that technology to treat a condition called trigeminal neuralgia, which is this excruciating facial pain that patients will experience. And it's very well known to carry a high rate of suicide because of how painful this condition is. But we were able to leverage the same system and provide the neurosurgeon, with a very unique tool to treat that condition. We also, what I'm also excited about is this same platform we're using now to develop technology to treat lower back pain. There's different types of lower back pain. We happen to be focusing on one that involves issues with the basivertebral nerve, which is a nerve in the lower spine. And then the more common back pain where you have pain that's traveling down the leg, that's sciatic nerve
Mhm.
pain. So we've been able to use this same electrode to develop technologies, unique technologies that would be able to treat that condition. And then finally, drug delivery. These electrodes have a hollow center, and we've been able to demonstrate in animals so far that not only can you use it for diagnostics and stimulating through, but you can also deliver therapeutic agents directly into the brain, specifically where you would like to deliver them. And we've initiated a program to try to improve really the care for patients that suffer from glioblastomas, which are those brain tumors that carry high rates of mortality.
Wow. Wow. Well, there is an incredible amount of innovation coming out of the company. I'm so excited to follow along and just see all of the difference that you're going to make in patients' lives. So, gosh, first of all, thank you for what you're doing. I I'm curious, you've had such a great career and so many different opportunities to grow into more and more leadership roles. And I'm wondering, first of all, what your own leadership philosophy is, sort of as a whole, and then maybe some examples of both good and not as ideal leadership that helped to shape it.
Yeah. So, I mean, for me, the people that I've always looked at that I think are great leaders are those people that can communicate a vision and really instill a passion to inspire others in the company to have the same sort of passion to achieve this overall vision or this overall strategy. And, there have been clearly people that I've worked for in my life that I've said, gosh, they really were inspirational to me to be better, not just, I would say, as a leader, but just more effective overall. And, when I look at my own areas that when I think about leadership and what I can do to be more effective, some of the areas that I've personally looked at are things that can make the company more efficient. And artificial intelligence is probably the one that gets, the most attention today. And I'm looking to using it and took a course in this actually to really become more efficient and help the company be more efficient in developing these technologies and getting them to market as quickly as possible. And I think, for myself, I'm very fortunate to be surrounded by a board of directors that I look at that I think have excellent leadership qualities. And it's really, meeting with them and just talking to them on a fairly regular basis, picking their mind to see how they would handle things because, I'm really the product of stealing ideas from other people that I think, have worked well and led to the success of companies and people that they've led. So it's not necessarily taking a course on leadership, but it's surrounding yourself with people that have been successful in leading groups and, getting ideas from them on how to be more efficient, whether it's, taking classes, in things like AI or just, learning from their own success as to how to inspire people to really finish the goal for whatever that goal is.
Yeah. Yeah. And speaking of inspiring people, how do you as a leader intentionally help shape the company culture that you feel is best for people to thrive in?
Yeah, so I've always been of the mindset that companies that perform the best utilize ideas that others on the team have. So there are I'll give you a great example. I find that people that come from big companies have more of a mindset of execution, meaning so whatever the boss tells me to do, I do, and I'm not going to challenge them. So it's one more of I find out what I need to do and I execute that. In our company, one of the things I try to foster is that it's okay to have a different opinion. We're all here, trying to be successful, and none of us have all the answers. Now, there's going to be times when we as a team just can't agree. And when those times occur, then, the CEO is going to have to make the final decision because that's, in my mind, that's really one of the roles of the CEO. But I can tell you in our company and in other companies I've been in, a lot of the great ideas on what to do, have really come from others. They haven't come from me. I may be setting the overall vision, but sometimes, you take a small detour because someone in the group who wasn't afraid to speak up, has an idea or a thought that, makes the outcome more successful, whether it's shortening the time or coming up with a different idea, a different concept. I constantly try to hire people that have skill sets that I don't have.
Yeah.
So for example, I recently, within the last 2 months, hired a guy that had great experience in the pharma space and really how to navigate that space and understands the therapies that are out there. And in a very short period of time, I realized, gosh, this guy, knows so much more than I know, and I'm going to learn a lot from him. So I think it's really empowering the people that you hire, to express what their thoughts and their ideas are, because I don't care what CEO you're talking about. None of us, have all the answers.
Yes. And recognizing that is definitely, I think, key. I think a lot of the leaders that I've been talking to recently talk about exactly what you've mentioned. It's recognizing that you do have your blind spots or your areas of weaknesses, and that's okay because we all do, right? But as long as you're willing to say, okay, this might not be my area, but I trust the person whose area I know it is, then that's just such a great way to handle that and empower the next generation of leaders. So yeah, I love that that's your approach.
And I also, one other area that I think is also critical, and it goes back to what I said about individuals that I've met in larger companies. And I experienced this when I was in a larger company as well. The focus becomes not making a mistake.
Mhm.
And it's because, these employees don't want to make a mistake that's going to cost them their career in that company. So the safest thing to do is to do what your supervisor tells you to do, as opposed to take a chance and, offer a different idea or a different concept. It's seen as risky.
Yeah.
And it's because there's this fear of making a mistake. I think in smaller companies, especially in companies that I've run, my philosophy is it's okay to make a mistake.
Mhm.
Let's not make the same mistake more than once. I mean, they're there to learn from. So let's be smarter the second time, because of that experience. But if people are afraid to make mistakes, you're never going to get different ideas or different concepts, out amongst the group because of the fear of making a mistake.
Mhm. Right. Yeah, absolutely. Providing that opportunity, and I know it's a bit of a cliche, but the idea of a safe environment, at least, to present those ideas and potentially counter opinions. And that's where creativity thrives, is when you can iterate and bounce ideas off each other and come up with something that's, you couldn't have done by yourself. Yeah, I love that approach.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, this is marvelous. I really appreciate all of this so far, but I'm going to pivot the conversation a little bit just for fun. So, imagine that you were to be offered $1 million to teach a masterclass on anything you want. It could be within your industry, but it doesn't have to be. What would you choose to teach?
Yeah, this doesn't fall under maybe necessarily, a class that you would see in a normal curriculum. But, it's something that I've tried to talk to my own children about, and that's teaching them about being thankful for what they have, and also, giving back to others that are less fortunate. I there's a saying that comparison is the thief of joy.
Mhm.
That I think the human race in itself just has a way of always dwelling on like what we don't have, as opposed to being, thankful to God for all that we do have. And I really think that one of the things that I've tried to instill in my children, and now they're all grown, is you got to be grateful for what you have, but you got to find ways to find common ground with people, and be sure to give back to others that haven't been as fortunate as you. I think that's what this world should be more focused on than all you hear about today is what we don't agree with, and why this side or that political party is ruining the world. I think we all focused a lot more of our energy on helping others. The world would be, and this will sound cliche, a much better place to live in. So if I could teach a course on instilling thankfulness and the importance of helping others, that's what I would do.
Yeah. Now that I couldn't agree more. Gratitude and giving back are key, and the world needs more of it. So I love that idea of a masterclass for sure. And how do you wish to be remembered after you leave this world?
Yeah, it kind of goes back to what my dad said to me, and that was as a youngster, and that is my passion and interest to really help others.
Yeah.
That sums it up the best.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. And final question. What is one thing that makes you smile every time you see or think about it?
I would say, there are people that will doubt you and put you down in your career and tell you why, you'll never do this or you'll never do that. And I can honestly say I never thought, I would ever stand in NASDAQ, on Wall Street and take a company public. And, the one thing I do kind of cherish is I've been able to do this twice, but the first time I remember standing on the stage before the activity started at NASDAQ. And one of the people in the company said to me, they said, you just had this smile, on your face, it looked like you were thinking of something. And I said, yeah, I was thinking about all those times that people told me that, I would never be successful in my career. And you can define success in different ways, but it kind of made me feel good. It was the first time I think I really felt, proud of myself that, wow, I'm one of a very small percentage of people that have been fortunate enough to actually, take a company public. So it always makes me smile.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Great answer. And that's a really cool moment to reflect back on. Well, Dave, this has been a great conversation. I so appreciate your willingness to talk with me today, but also to share about the incredible work that your company is doing and your heart for helping people from the very beginning of your childhood, and obviously a huge passion of yours throughout your life. And we are so honored to be making a donation on your behalf as a thank you for your time today to Opportunity International, which works to end global poverty by creating and sustaining jobs while also providing small business loans, savings, insurance, and training to more than 14 million people in the developing world. So thank you so much for choosing that organization to support. And thank you for everything that you're doing to change lives for a better world.
Well, thanks for having me on the show as well.
Of course.
The Leading Difference is brought to you by Velentium Medical. Velentium Medical is a full-service CDMO serving medtech clients worldwide to securely design, manufacture, and test Class 2 and Class 3 medical devices. Velentium Medical's 4 units include research and development, pairing electronic and mechanical design, embedded firmware, mobile app development, and cloud systems, with the human factor studies and systems engineering necessary to streamline medical device regulatory approval. Contract manufacturing, building medical products at the prototype, clinical, and commercial levels in the U.S. as well as in low-cost regions in 1345 certified and FDA-registered Class 7 clean rooms. Cybersecurity, generating the 12 cybersecurity design artifacts required for FDA submission. And automated test systems, assuring that every device produced is exactly the same as the device that was approved. Visit ValentiumMedical.com to explore how we can work together to change lives for a better world.